If you walk around an academic conference, you will go to this poster session and you will see tens or hundreds or thousands of grad students and postdocs with a poster, and it represents their work. If you ask them why they are doing that work, they will always have an answer. Mm-hmm. If you ask them why they're doing that work again, they may have a less clear answer. Why is this the thing you're dedicating your life to? Is this the most important thing you could be working on? Is this the highest impact thing you could be doing? I think most of them won't answer yes to that last question, right? One of the things that Foresight has done, that Convergence is doing, that Renaissance Philanthropy is doing, is trying to raise the level of ambition of scientists. Of saying no, actually, you can change the world. You can build organizations that change the world. You can build technologies that make the world better. How do you identify those opportunities and go after that? This is really important.
Today, I'm really excited to have Anastasia Gamick. I hope I'm pronouncing your name good. Who you are the president and co-founder of Convergent Research.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to have you on, we've had Adam, your co-founder, on to talk about the really great and exciting work that you're doing. But I heard you give a talk recently at the Progress Conference at this same venue a few months ago, where you talked about how you had actually worked to prioritize the capabilities that you're working on at Convergent Research. And I thought that could be a really interesting topic to dive into. I also think we should do a little recap of what it is that you're doing at Convergent, of course, for those that haven't heard the Adam episode. But yeah, why don't we just start there? Who are you and what is Convergent Research?
Yeah, I'm Anastasia Gamick, as you said. My background is almost entirely in startups. I was really early at Neuralink, Elon's brain computer interface company. I worked in robotics. I worked across last mile payment delivery in sub-Saharan Africa, helping big NGOs send funds directly to beneficiaries. And Adam and I started Convergent. Actually, largely, I was really inspired by Elon Gurr, who's here at this Foresight event also. How do you create the mechanisms to help leading scientists take their ideas out of the lab into the real world? And Adam proposed this idea called a focused research organization. So this is a startup-inspired R&D project. Think something like a critical mass of people over a critical mass of time working and acting like a startup. They have a CEO. They have a 5-year roadmap. They do quarterly planning. They have OKRs. They have a multidisciplinary team. They have software engineers, and they have virologists and automation engineers all working together towards a very specific technical goal. And we look for projects that can't be done in academia, generally because they're a bad fit, because they have a bad dollar to paper ratio. It's a lot of engineering work. It's not something where you're going to generate enough publications to justify your next grant cycle or your next grad student. And it's a bad fit for-profit settings because it's a nonprofit. It's a public good. It's hard to capture that value. So we call these focused research organizations, and we've launched 10 of them over the last 4 years.
Do you want to tell us a bit, which are the 10 organizations that you've actually launched?
This is a quiz, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the first two were E11 Bio and Cultivarium. E11 Bio will be very familiar, I think, to the Foresight audience. They're doing high throughput connectomics. So they're actually building synaptic level maps of the brain, what neurons talk to what neurons. I guess even more specifically, though, they're building the tools that let us do that cheaply. They're working on fundamental capabilities, which we'll probably get back to, around brain mapping. And then we have one, Cultivarium's working on non-model organisms. So how do you take the biodiversity that exists in the world and use all of the different microbes to their fullest potential? Right now, if you find a cool microbe in your backyard, because there's definitely a cool microbe in your backyard, and it produces a protein you like, actually there's no real way to use that in a industrial lab setting. And so they're building the tooling that you need to make those different microbes tractable. And then we have other projects that span neuromodulation. We're building a big telescope that should be able to see the dark matter that's strung between galaxies, working on single-cell proteomics. So these are all projects that we think fundamentally change the way that their fields will work.
Yeah. And like, I think you mentioned this, they are time bound. Like, it's 5 years normally. What happens now with, like, when did E11 start, for example? And is it closing in on its 5 years?
Yeah, E11 has a couple years left. They're about 3 years old. They just entered their phase 2. Yeah, so at the end of these projects, they're, I guess, first on the time-bounded nature. I think that oftentimes open-ended research is this really beautiful and wonderful fundamental part of our R&D ecosystem. But it's very exploratory, and sort of you're always coming back for more funding. I think that oftentimes when you talk to philanthropists, one of the things they're concerned about is that if they fund an organization, someone has to fund that organization again next year, and someone has to fund it again the next year. And so by having them be time-bounded, we've sort of limited the ask on philanthropists. We're not asking you to support an organization for forever. We're asking you to support this 5 or 6 year project. Yeah, and at the end of those projects, many, many things can happen, and it'll depend really deeply on what that project is. Some may spin off into a for-profit startup. You may be able to capture value someplace in the chain, and you can take that piece and create a biotech out of it. Some may be donated to another nonprofit. There are a bunch of nonprofits out there in the world that kind of operate continuously, and they could take on this. Some could go back to academia. Some could be open source data sets that are just used. Others could become like contract research organizations. So I think that each one of the FROs will have a different path forward as they figure out what is the biggest impact they could have with their work.
And could it be that they deem that it would be to continue or something like that as a FRO?
I think that rather than continue as a FRO, there may be like another FRO that follows it. So I think that it's actually really important that they be time-bounded. I think that we would be unhappy with the outcome of like, well, let's just tack another 2 years in. Let's tack another 2 years on. Because the point is that there's like a very clear product or output at the end of the FRO that we want to exist. E11 is going to make this brain mapping technology 100 times cheaper or 1,000 times cheaper. And when they do that, that's the end of that FRO. They could then say, actually, now what I want is to like map a whole mouse brain. Now what I want is to do the human connectome project. And you could pick a different project and use the same team towards that other goal. But I wouldn't want to just like append a year, because I think that it becomes much more like a traditional nonprofit where you're out there every year fundraising for your budget the following year. And I think that the beauty about FROs is that you're really building from the get-go a very clear product. It means you can go to philanthropists or you can go to the government and you can say, this is what needs to exist in the world. This is why. And it's going to take us, $30 to $50 million and 5 to 6 years to build that specific thing.
Yeah. I do love the time-bounded element. I think it's quite unique, or at least from what I know. And yeah, it avoids this problem of everything needing to be its own like forever project.
And I think that one of the reasons that startups are so successful is that there's a real existential dread. Like you're kind of afraid the whole time that you're not going to raise your next round. I don't think that exists in the same way in industry labs, or it doesn't exist in the same way in academia. So having this notion that I have to hit this goal in the next year to raise my next round, I think is really important and a thing that we're trying to mimic.
Yeah. So maybe we dive into then how you came to choose the ones that you choose. And yeah, so again, to like cover the framing a bit for this episode was at your talk at the Progress Conference, you were talking about how to choose capabilities to prepare for the intelligence age. And yeah, maybe do you want to just start with saying what you mean by the intelligence age?
Yeah. Adam and I sat down in January of this year. And we thought about sort of the year 2075. And I think we expect a lot to change between now and then. I think that we've seen real progress in AI and real new capabilities. And so if that goes as well as it possibly can, what does that world look like? What does it look like when we have leveraged this really amazing new technology for all of its benefits and avoided all of the downsides? And so we thought about things like, well, we've avoided big risks. So we've avoided AI causing, letting people design bioweapons that cause pandemics. We've avoided, a world in which everybody is just using AI to hack each other's critical infrastructure and no one has power and no one has fresh water. We've avoided a world where democracy has collapsed and civil discourse has collapsed. And instead, we have a world where maybe even like civil discourse is more humane and more open and more collaborative than it is today. There's a world where AIs are and LLMs are building sort of confidence and comfort in being human, maybe have like encouraged more interpersonal connection. We are, we've solved all of our, there's no more, there's not a lack of materials anymore, right? We're in a post-scarcity world. We can solve diseases. We can print medicine. We have a Star Trek style replicator, right? And we a couple other to clean abundant energy. There are a couple others we thought through. So we're like, wait, so that's the world we want. Well, that's great. I can't really just like make that world. What are the like fundamental capabilities? What are the things we need to build today to get there? So we spend a lot of time thinking about that. Like, what are the seeds of those technologies? So, if you think about a post-scarcity world, there's positional chemistry, there's nanotech. Can you actually like solve many of these critical pieces that you need to build the systems of the future?
But just I love that practice, and it actually shows it's something that we've done a lot at the Existential Hope program. Is we call it world building. You can call it scenario planning, whatever you want, kind of. But I love that you've done that and like really put it into action. Of like that's the point, that's why we're doing it, so that we can backcast and think about what should we be doing now in order to make it happen.
Right.
Sorry.
Well, no. And it's, I think that some of this is built on, I think that one of the core things that we think about is this notion of a fundamental capability. So you can think of the world being full of things that we interact with, whether that be computers or medicine, mRNA vaccines, LiDAR. There are like things that we use in the world. They're actually based on more basic research. They're based on more basic discoveries or tools. And we want to back out into what are these like enabling technologies? What causes all of these downstream outcomes? E11 Bio is an example of this where, if you think about understanding how consciousness arises, if you think about neurodegenerative or neuropsychiatric diseases, if you think about neural nets, there is a common understanding that you would want to know across all of these different things, which is the like synaptic wiring of our brain. But actually, to make a synaptic wiring of the brain, you need a mapping technology. To make that mapping technology, a big piece of that is called proofreading or error correcting. And that is an incredibly expensive process. And so that is how we got to the notion of E11 Bio, because we took several technologies together and we said, if they can build this fundamental capability, it'll enable all of these downstream outcomes. And so we've looked across that in many different fields and have fellows working across a handful of different fields right now too.
Which are, you don't need to go through all of them, but what are some of the other fundamental capabilities that I'm guessing then you have other focused research organizations maybe working on, or maybe that will start working on it?
Yeah, we've been spending a lot of time thinking about sort of good epistemics. I think that like as a society, there are a bunch of tools that have caused us to potentially have worse epistemics, worse conversations. And so are there software tools, AI tools that you could build for deliberative democracy, for better conversations. I think that if you look at something like X or Twitter, no, I'm blanking on what it's called.
The community notes?
Yeah, the community. Thank you.
Yeah.
Like, this is like actually a really crucial invention.
Yeah.
Are there other inventions like that we could find that would improve the way that discourse is had? So that is an area that we're spending a lot of time. We're still very much on the road mapping stage there. There's a potential project we're really excited about in deliberative democracy based on some work from scientists from Google and from a couple other organizations.
That's so exciting. I know that that's definitely a fundamental capability. I also heard that, Aria were thinking of something similar, and like that's exciting that you guys are thinking about that, because I think that's definitely something that comes to mind for the layman or something, that this is a bit challenging right now.
I think this would be a big part of sort of how our world changes over the next several decades. Nicole Wheeler, the Aria PM, actually came to a workshop that we had on this. And so a lot of what we do is convene groups. We threw a workshop in September where we had people from, it was the strangest workshop anyone's ever thrown, from positional chemistry, from biosecurity, from this deliberative democracy team, from provably secure software, and to sort of thought about what is this world that we're going to. We have people from different policy orgs and different government orgs also there as we're kind of thinking about this world that we're heading towards.
That's really cool. Yeah.
It was so much fun. I learned a ton.
And this was for the epistemics point only? Or
no, so it was across everything, and then epistemics is one of the groups that was there. And I think that one of the things that Foresight does, and one of the things that Aria does that I really admire, is cross-disciplinary conversations. I actually think that they are really inspirational for people and really help people kind of figure out how their projects should interact with the world. So we had leaders from the areas that we are kind of most interested in all together. Another area that we're thinking about is sort of provably safe software or formally verified software. So things that one of our projects is called Lean, which is an open source software language for formal math. It allows you to do the type of math that involves proofs and kind of the higher end math on a computer, and then would allow a computer to like automate those proofs. And so we're thinking about what are extensions of this. And one would be, could you build software that you knew that it did what you intended it to do? So one of the things that's hard is that you can right now prove sometimes software against a spec. But how do you know if your spec is actually like what you wanted it to accomplish? How do you know that your spec is like written correctly? So we're working on a project called Oath right now that would be sort of designing that system.
And do you have any examples of maybe a project that you decided not to pursue, like just to understand the decision making process a bit? Like, is there something that you thought maybe this we were considering this as a focused research organization, but decided not to because I don't know.
I think I could probably give 3 separate cases where this is true.
Yeah.
So one, we saw a pretty cool biology project. But it was what I thought of as like a biosecurity risk. And so it was like there was a high upside. I think this project would have been really beneficial in many, many ways. But I think had a pretty significant biosecurity risk. And I think that we try very hard to build defense-dominant technologies, things that don't have dual use potential, things that can't cause like serious harm. So that is an example of a type of project we don't do. Another project that we don't do is people have brought us projects and we're like, that's a startup. You should go raise for-profit funding for that. If you can raise for-profit funding for this, if you have users, if you have customers, you should do that instead. And then we get a lot of, there are 2 other ones. We get a lot of projects that come to us in the form of, I would like more money for my lab. And I like love academic research. And I think that like curiosity-based, investigator-based research is really important, but it's not what we do. I think that rather than just being, well, my lab is focused on this area. Actually, the goal of a focused research organization that there's a really clear product, a clear, data set, a tool, a platform that exists on the other side of it, not just more research in a single area. And so I think that's like a big difference there. And then the last one is that, I think that we're going to see a lot of advances from AI over the next couple of decades. And so we're trying to pick projects that are not easily obsolesced. I think that there are interesting things to do in software right now, and specifically like software for science. And it's just unclear to me that AI won't be able to do them in 5 years. And so we're looking for projects that are going to be easily done by AI instead, also that will potentially enable AI or enable AI-based science. So I think that this is, building the right data set is a really big one here.
Yeah. Do you have any ideas or projects that are kind of a little bit the opposite, where you think like, well, actually, we don't think it's worth, this is a capability that we would like, but we don't think it's worth starting because we expect AI to help us be able to solve it much faster in 5 years? Maybe there's nothing like that.
Yeah, no, I think that there are. I think that actually I would think of it even more as like, if they're starting, we should start it as how do we leverage AI? I think that there's a project out there called the Great Refractor. Have you heard of this?
No.
Oh gosh, I'm gonna speak out of turn now because I am not a scientist. Or specifically, I'm really not a software person. But there is a bunch of code in the world that is written in C, which is a memory insecure language.
Okay.
It's it's not very safe. A lot of our infrastructure is built in this. You could move it into a more secure language. So it's like a big code refractor for basically everything we do. And so it's like, how do you build the tooling to make that happen well and safely? And I think that like figuring out how you leverage AI for projects like that is really important. Another big one is that right now, all climate models are done basically in like Fortran on super high capacity supercomputers. Right, they're done in like the same way that they've been done for decades. They don't run on GPUs. They don't run in Python. And so how do you refactor all of these models to instead be able to run on the increased capacity from GPUs in better software? I think that kind of across science we have this problem where grad students, we all love grad students, but like grad students have done a lot of the coding and then they have left. And so the software that powers a lot of our best science is not maybe the best the quality software you would expect from a software company.
Yeah, that's a more interesting point, even like how do you leverage AI in your projects? Do you sort of have that with you across all of the projects these days? Like, does it relate to all the projects yet, AI?
Yeah, I think it does. I think that there's an extent to which any of our existing projects were already in this framing of E11 Bio. I think if you are thinking about uploading, if you are thinking about creating a digital twin of a brain, all of these things are dependent on the discoveries that E11 Bio, like, you will need AI to do any of that, but you then need the fundamental truth from E11 Bio also. And so I think a lot of our projects are of this sense where like the truths that we are discovering can be paired well with AI to get to the outcomes we want in the world.
Yeah. And do you remember from your sort of world building workshop that you did, we touched on the epistemics point. Were there any other, we touched on the coding, any other sort of fundamental capabilities to specifically prepare us for like the intelligence age, that came up?
Yeah, so I think that there's this category we called biological and ecological dark matter, which is again so I expect AI to be able to rapidly advance science, right? I expect that well, I think it is a fair expectation that AI could rapidly advance science, but it still has to, whatever systems they are, still have to see and interact with the world.
Yeah.
And so right now, we have a very limited understanding of how even like human biology works. We don't understand how all of the very complex immune system works. We don't understand how your metabolism works. We don't understand all of the proteins that exist in your body. And so how we expect an AI agent or an AI system to go and like suddenly solve cancer is really difficult. And so how do you build the tools and the data sets that a super intelligent AI system would need to do that research is a lot of what we're thinking. How do you create the visibility there? Right. So like, is this, better microscopes? Is this better sensing? Is this bigger data sets that you can train it on or you can use as reinforcement learning containers for?
Are there? That's a really interesting. I haven't heard about the biological dark matter.
Yeah, biological. We use internally biological or ecological dark matter.
Yeah.
So I guess like, this is maybe where I and my friends who work at the frontier labs like disagree the most. They're like, "Yeah, it's just gonna do it." And I was like, we literally can't see how anything works right now. We we do not have a synaptic level map of the brain. We currently have very little idea of what glial cells do in the brain, right? We don't know how all of the all of the ion gated pathways work between neurons. And so if we can't see that and we can't show it to an AI system, how that AI system is supposed to like learn and work with it is like really unclear. So how do we find, and I think that one of the problems with biology is that there's just like infinite things that one could look at, right? It's just like a combinatorially like insane problem. And so a lot of what we're doing is trying to figure out what are the right data sets. What are the like tools and the capabilities that would make us capable of doing this kind of research.
Yeah. Thank you so much. You're really doing like the groundwork for all the rest of us.
It's fun and it's not. I think that one of the things that's interesting about scientists is that they're not incentivized to ask themselves this question, right? Most scientists are incentivized to ask themselves, how do I get my next grant? How do I hire a grad student? How do I get my next position? How do I get a postdoc? Most companies are incentivized to say like, how do I make money? Where is the therapeutic on the other side of this? You can look at companies like Laura Deming's company Until, or you could look at things like Max Hodek's company Science Corps, and they're like really far-reaching, really hard companies, and even they are like, and I understand one day how users will interact with this. No one's going to interact with like making single-cell proteomics 100 times cheaper, right? There's like a handful of scientists who will, no end users who will, and so the companies aren't incentivized also to think about these fundamental capabilities.
Yeah, it's very, very much appreciated and very, very needed. I love it, and I love the big vision, basically. Do you think about that with any of your like when you create a new FRO? Would it ever be like, are they all kind of moonshot, or are you pretty certain you're gonna achieve within the 5-year range what you set out?
There's like often a world. We don't always say this publicly, but sometimes they're very boring projects. Right. So we have this high throughput drug screening project, and I am not calling you guys boring, I promise. They're doing an amazing job where they're taking a bunch of human druggable targets. So GPCRs, they're taking there's like a wide variety of ways in which drugs can interact with the human body, so gene targets. And then like all of the FDA approved drugs. Or what if they took a bunch of Chinese peptides, or what if they took microplastics, or what if they took things from the environment and they screened them against those targets and they open source that data set. There are some ways in which this is just like really basic work, right? You develop an assay, you run things through that assay in high throughput screening. You develop another assay, you run things through that assay. There's like some scientific risk, but there isn't a huge amount of scientific risk. There's some engineering risk. There isn't a huge amount of engineering risk. But I know we can get to the end of it. But I think that actually what it'll show will be incredibly impactful. It'll like change the way we think about drug discovery, or change the way that we think about how we interact with all of the new materials that we're putting into the world. And so in some ways, it doesn't actually feel like the project itself doesn't feel as moonshotty, but the impacts of the project are definitely like a moonshot impact.
Yeah. So it's pretty, you know what you need to do kind of when you start a focused research organization.
Yeah.
It's like,
I think that like, one of the biggest difference between an FRO and a DARPA program is a DARPA program will be like, I know I need to go that way. I would like to be able to sense this thing. I would like to be able to treat, patients in the field. I would like to, but I don't know the best way to do it. So I'm going to take like 6 or 7 or 10 bets and kill the performers that aren't working and kind of work in that direction. Versus an FRO is like, no, I need to build this product. This is the roadmap to get me there. And I'm pretty sure I can get there. There's always some scientific risk. Even in the assay development, not all the assays work. And some of them have more, E11 have like a lot of scientific risk. But it's still very clear what they're building at the end and how people would use that product. Which is different than how like a DARPA program would run.
Very different, yeah. Are there any more capabilities that we haven't touched on, especially in relation to the intelligence age that you want to mention before we go to the next?
I think that neuroscience is going to continue to be incredibly important. I think that if, there's like a philosophical reason, which is that if we are creating intelligence, we had better understand how our intelligence works, right? If it is true that we're creating, a super intelligent, which I am not convinced of, but there's like some possibility that we will like create super intelligence, we better know what intelligence is and like how our brains get there and how we run those same systems. Even to actually like, if we improve our capabilities, can we figure out how to like solve depression? Can we figure out how to tune our moods? What are the capabilities that we can unlock by using AI? And so I think that neuroscience continues to be a priority for us.
You've had so far 2 FROs in neuroscience?
Yeah, we have 2 US-based, we have Forest and E11 Bio. We're looking at a handful of other, both US and UK-based neuroscience FROs.
And can you tease with any of what their like focus would be?
Trying to figure out if I should say this.
It's not mandatory.
What the UK one, and we should double check before we release this episode, building in vivo videos of connectomics. So in like movies of how synapses are firing, and then over time how synapses change when you learn. And so it's actually, again, a little bit like E11 Bio. It isn't, the videos are important, and we're hopefully look immediately at postpartum depression, and like maybe even make discoveries pretty quickly. But the thing that we're working on is how do you build the tooling to let you take these videos over the course of months as brains change, so that we understand how circuits rewire and how those systems develop.
Very interesting. We'll check on if they keep it, but very, very interesting. And also nice that is that your first organization that wouldn't be in the US? Or
so there's already one non-Convergent, non-US FRO, which is Gabby Heller's FRO Bind, and it's working on intrinsically disordered proteins, and she's amazing, and their work is amazing. That was funded by Research Ventures Catalyst in the UK. We are working right now with ARIA we ran a call for proposals, and then we ran a residency, and we're going to launch 1 or more FROs early next year in the UK.
That's so exciting. So the model is catching on.
Yeah, I think that like people, Elon Gurr, as I mentioned, runs Aria and is kind of a thinker who's really inspired me. But I think that people, both in governments and in science, are attracted to the idea that you can build a tool and you can know what you're buying to some extent. Like, you want this capacity. So rather than having a bunch of people work towards it, or rather than funding some labs to maybe do that, to build that exact capacity, I think appeals both to federal funders and to philanthropists.
Yeah. So moving away a little bit to more like larger scale philosophical framing or something is, I was doing research for this episode, finding some work from you where you were talking about we need to think more about steering rather than just accelerating technological progress. How could you maybe expand a bit on that, or like explain what you mean by it?
Yeah. I think that there's sort of a notion that technology is like in one direction. You go fast or you don't go at all. But I think that we can pick selectively beneficial technologies. We can choose what we want to accelerate. So this is then related very much so to this biosecurity this question. So you can pick technologies that have dual uses. They could have positive outcomes, and they can have negative outcomes. Or you can select for defense dominant technologies, things that work primarily on the defense side. I spend a lot of time. I'm on the board of a Blueprint Biosecurity, and we've spent a fair amount of time road mapping in the biosecurity space. So if you look at things like advanced PPE, right? So ways to prevent you or others from coming in contact with
PPE is like protective,
personal protective equipment. This is like a defense dominant technology. There's not a dual use for it. There's not a negative outcome from it. So you can think about things also like built environment. So if you were to put far UVC light, so we already use UV light to sterilize water. We've done that for decades. So if you go to like your gym and you put your water bottle in, there's a little tiny UV light in there that is sterilizing that water as it comes out. There is a band of UV that's not dangerous to humans, called far UVC. If we put that in this room, in conference centers and hotels and hospitals, could we reduce transmission rates? Or there is something called glycol, which is this. Actually, if you go to a rave, you're very safe from a biosecurity event. I'm joking. But it is in fog machines already. So this tiny molecule that in far lower concentrations than would be in a fog machine can actually really disrupt viruses from being transmitted. So, and then the last one is air turnover. So places that have higher air turnover have a lower viral load in the atmosphere, right? So if you were to push forward these three mechanisms and develop technologies in these three spaces, it is like a defense dominant scenario. And so I think that these are things that we want more of in the world, especially as potentially AI is increasing risks from biosecurity threats. And so we're thinking about that across bio, across hardware, across software, across science. What are the things we can do that accelerate the features we want, and then don't accelerate negative features?
I think that's a great framing. It's it relates to a lot of things, I guess, like the DIAC framing of Vitalik and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's very, very, very inspired by Vitalik's DIAC.
Yeah. I also, you mentioned Blueprint Biosecurity. I think I heard Jacob Sweat say at some point that we will think about the air quality that we have now. We will think of as like the Middle Ages, how we did like general like cleanliness on the streets and things like that. Because there's so much more we can do in terms of like, we're at a conference right now.
Right.
When you start to think about all, I guess, especially after COVID, when we all became very aware of like these things, it's crazy.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that's really hard is this is like a classic collective action or public goods problem where no one really wants to fund this work because we're all we all have to live in this world. The downside of a next pandemic or a biosecurity event is like a theoretical downside, and is hard to like rally resources to prevent those types of things.
Yeah.
And it's not something that anybody feels that they should be funding. And so I think that it has been harder to get support behind some of these like really clear biosecurity efforts.
Yeah. Well, I think like back to the steering point. I just like the hour before you came in, I interviewed Jason Crawford in here, who just wrote his Techno Humanist Manifesto, and in there he talks a lot about how like his vision for what we should be aiming to do is to increase human agency, and that's what he sees like the progress movement's purpose as being, and I kind of like that framing in relation to the steering, because in one sense, just thinking of it as like, oh no, we can only accelerate and there's only one way to do it, seems to not account for the agency that we have in steering this.
I think if you walk around an academic conference, I don't know how many of you have gone to academic conferences, you will go to this poster session and you will see tens or hundreds or thousands of grad students and postdocs with a poster, and it represents their work. If you ask them why they are doing that work, they will always have an answer.
Mm-hmm.
If you ask them why they're doing that work again, they may have like a less like clear answer. Like, why is this the thing you're dedicated your life to? Is this the most important thing you could be working on? Is this the highest impact thing you could be doing? I think like most of them won't answer yes to that last question, right? I think that one of the things that I think Foresight has done, that Convergence is doing, that Renaissance Philanthropy is doing, is trying to raise the level of ambition of scientists, of saying like, no, actually, like, you can change the world. You can build organizations that change the world. You can build technologies that make the world better. How do you identify those opportunities and go after that? This is like really important.
Do you have any recommendations for like, should they, where can they find the best information so that they can make the most informed decisions on what to work on?
I don't know if there's a single place. I would say talking to people outside of your field is a really big one.
Yeah.
I think that talking to people in other fields, talking to non-academics, people talking to policymakers, I think that there is this really wonderful community of people out there trying to make a difference in sharing information. So, Foresight is part of that. I think that Institute for Progress is part of that. FAI is part of that. There are all of these orgs who are looking at scientific priorities. So specifically talking to scientists, I think that like getting into some of those circles and talking, like asking questions and talking outside of specific fields is a big part of it.
Yeah.
I think that it's very easy to get caught up in the world that you're in.
You guys also, I think on your website, you have like you have some resources, and you created the gap map, right?
We created something called the gap map, which is sort of like an artifact of all of the conversations that Adam and Mary and other people on our team have had with scientists, kind of identifying what the biggest gaps in the R&D ecosystem are right now, what technologies should exist.
That must have been a big project, kind of like identifying all these gaps. Or
yeah, it was to some extent it was actually just like everything Adam has done for the last decade, and then a big project of like
his brain kind of
trying to figure out how to like take all of those notes and synthesize them into this gap map. I think that people often ask us like how we built it or how we build roadmaps, and it's complicated. I don't know if there is like a good formula for it. I think that like you can get to a field and then there are like some exercises you can do to like roadmap within that field. But like in this really multidisciplinary big way, a lot of it is talking to experts and like leaning on what they know and what they see and asking them what they think the biggest bottlenecks in their field are, what's blocking their progress, why is nobody working on this, who else could work on it, and doing some sort of like mass interview process, and then being really generous with your time and with connections to continue to like explore that network.
So in your preparations, there's no like one recipe for all in how you've done the roadmaps?
If I were to pick two things that is really common, is you have to work multidisciplinary, because I think that both because I think that it changes the way you think and you think bigger because of it. But every time we've done a roadmap, we do these road mapping workshops where we get people together about a field and we talk about it. If you do it with a bunch of experts in the field, you just have the same conference that is happening all the time anyway. Everyone talks about their papers, or they don't talk about their papers because they don't want to get scooped. But if you bring in that weirdo blogger, and if you bring in somebody from an adjacent field, and you bring in practitioners and users, and you put all of these people who don't belong together in the same room, really magical things come out of it. And so that's a big one for me, is being multidisciplinary and talking to a lot of people.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, that very much fits what Foresight is doing and has been trying to do for a long time. Is there anything else before we wrap up that you think we've missed talking about the work that you guys are doing?
I think that there's we're at a really interesting moment where I think that there's a bunch of new philanthropy, and people are trying to figure out how to use that most effectively. And the government is looking at different ways to fund science. And there's a bunch of talk about meta science. I think that there's an opportunity right now to actually, Convergent Research was maybe one of a handful of orgs that came up 5 years ago who started to make these changes. But I think that we can either say, okay, we've run an experiment, let's see how it goes, or really push forward a systematic change with support from philanthropists and policymakers. And I think that all of these groups, scientists, philanthropists, policymakers, meta science people, working together is really important for the changes we want to see in creating that positive future over the next few years.
Yeah, we had a whole track now on philanthropic funding and how we can use it most efficiently, and new models and everything. Yeah. So I guess check out the Vision Weekend recordings. They will be on YouTube. Perfect. Well, I think then I just want to ask you one final question, which is, when you think about the future, what gives you existential hope right now?
I think it's communities. I am fortunate to interact with people, scientists and policymakers and people here and philanthropists who are all genuinely trying to build that better future. And there are so many people leaning their weight and their dollars and their time and their effort behind that it gives me a lot of hope for humanity and the kind of the world that we're building.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's in general something that brings me a lot of hope, and I think it's pretty universal. If you find a community that you align with, it's very catalyzing. Yeah, in many ways. That's it. Thank you so much, Anastasia.
Thank you.